Good day and greetings from Pretoria, South Africa. My name is Dr. Charles Cotter. I'm the Learning Navigator, the Change Management and Leadership in a Crisis online learning program, part of the e-learning series. This is an on-demand learning program and comprises of 6 modules. Each of the registered learners will receive a SlideShare presentation per module, and then also a detailed workbook which comprises the content, but also a series of learning activities, which I'll expect you to complete at the end of each of these modules. I think this is probably the best way of continuing the engagement and also to stimulate discussion between the Learning Navigator and the registered learners. As a form of introduction, I'd like to give you a quick overview of my professional pedigree. Essentially, I've been in the field of education, training, and development for the last 19 years. Of those 19, 15 as an independent contractor. I've been very privileged to have worked for over 140 different companies, both in the public and private sector. And of course, this stretches across 18 different countries and 4 different continents. My area of subject matter expertise is strategic management, change management, and also strategic human resources management. I'd like us to move on to the next outcome, and that is to look at the talent management process during a crisis, management of the remote working force. And perhaps I could start off this session by looking at a quote. This was something that I developed speaking at a conference in 2019. And I did suggest as talent managers, we need to liberate, not hoard, the treasure trove of African talent. And I think we can say continentally, but also globally. I would like to believe that the statement also rings true in other parts of the world. So I think don't suppress talent, don't hoard it, don't monopolize it. The critical success factor is, of course, to liberate that talent. I think the research is very clear. The most talented employees will probably not work more than 2 to 3 years in your company, but you need to treat them like the marketers would call a cash cow. You need to milk that talent dry. You need to optimize that talent as much as possible, especially in your 9-box matrix. Box number 9, the star performers, they are the drivers of business performance and business success. Change, crisis management, those are no exceptions to the norm. And of course, when you're working with a star performer who happens to be a remote worker or is part of your virtual work team, I think you need to be even more on point with your talent and people management strategies to get the best to the most out of them. In my opinion, probably the best integrated talent management model that I've come across recently is based on the work of Deloitte. And Deloitte have labeled this as what they call the irresistible organization. Now, the irresistible organization, you will see, comprises of 5 factors. And in each of the 5 factors, they've drilled down based on their research, and they've identified 4 sub-factors in each of the 5 factors. So there's a total of 20 sub-factors. And you'll see the baseline, which is very important, is cross-organizational collaboration and communication. And we've repeatedly said that these are 2 critical success factors, communication and collaboration. And when you find yourself in a remote working culture, this is even more of an imperative that you have this open door policy and that you try to facilitate this efficient communication as much as possible. So I'm going to leave this with you. I'm just going to selectively identify and isolate 1 or 2 of the sub-factors in each of the 5 factors, which then collectively constitute the so-called irresistible organization. In fact, when we look at learning activity 14, I would like you on a 5-point scale to measure the degree of compliance in each of your organizations. And then, of course, this will collectively lead to a percentage. You'll be able to score out of 100. And again, to do a gap analysis and recommend strategies on how to close each of these gaps. So let's just select 1 or 2 under each of the factors. So if you look at the first one, it's meaningful work. I think the first one there that immediately catches my attention is autonomy, selective fit. We spoke about the job, the person, and the cultural, the environment fit, which is so important. Small empowered teams. Like I said, with Module 6, we're going to look at virtual teams. That's very important. Supportive management culture, the second factor. Clear and transparent goals. The importance of coaching. If you subscribe to the work of Gallup, of course, you will buy into strengths-based leadership coaching. Agile performance management. I think we've repeatedly mentioned that. Flexible working environment, factor number 3. Humanistic approach. So the HX that we spoke about, employee engagement doesn't seem good enough anymore. We need to take it to the next level. Employee experience and ultimately human experience. Culture of recognition, there it is. Again, so all the experts seem to agree. Glassdoor, Gallup, also Deloitte now are throwing their influence into the mix, and they're suggesting that culture recognition is very important. Harvard Business Review labeled that as the #1 driver, the #1 influencing force to employee engagement. Growth opportunities, again, even in the video clip, what makes employee engagement great. Fantastic video clip, not only contrasting what makes good and average companies, what differentiates great companies or excellent companies. And I think growth opportunities, you'll see, is one of the strategies that they've identified. Facilitated talent mobility, this investment mindset that we said, the high-low, the high-impact learning organizational culture, just to verify what I've repeatedly said throughout the program. And trust in leadership. Again, Covey's emotional bank account, the metaphor for the amount of trust in any kind of relationship, the cornerstone. And I think if you see some of the values there, you'll agree with me. Transparency, honesty, and of course, change leaders are synonymous with inspiration. You'll recall from Module 2, we looked at transformational leaders, and they provide that idealized influence, that inspirational motivation. And of course, this collectively constitutes the 20 sub-factors. These are the building blocks for an integrated talent management strategy. And I would strongly recommend that initially you use it as the yardstick for diagnosis, but that you also use it as the blueprint for crafting your talent management strategies, especially when you find yourself in a radical state of change during a crisis. And of course, this is very useful because of the versatility. It can be used for on-site employees, but also can be used equally effectively for the work from home, the remote working culture. Also, virtual team structures can certainly benefit from this blueprint. We mentioned this earlier on, and in fact, CIPD mentioned this as the first strategy, employee voice. And I think the importance here, stimulating ideas, innovation, management, and the imperative of leaders in particular to be effective listeners, active listening, attentive listening, empathetic listening. Very important that we apply this as much as possible. And maybe the best way to amplify the importance of employee voice is to quote Sir Richard Branson, and he says that brilliant ideas can spring from the most unlikely places. So you should always keep your ears open for some shrewd advice. Again, I'd like to check with you whether you agree or disagree with this particular quote. And you're welcome to drop me an email again in this regard, just informally as to whether you believe in this. And there's a very good program on the major broadcast channels. Undercover Boss, previously it was called Going Back to the Floor. And it just suggests that leaders need to literally go back to the shop floor. They need to apply management by walking around. They need to have the finger on the pulse of what's happening. And of course, this enables them to have greater insight into some of the challenges that grassroots employees are confronted with. And I think you'll agree with me that the most innovative ideas do not emanate from the boardroom. In fact, they emanate from the shop floor. So as a change leader, as an executive manager, don't cut yourself off to that avenue, that opportunity to stimulate that innovation, constantly listening to a different perspective. And like we said, This employee voice is not only a form of employee democracy, but also participation. This consultation undoubtedly leads to high levels of employee engagement. Just as we transition from talent to people management, which would be the third and final outcome of Module 5, again, a quote from March 2020, in terms of promoting career fluidity, leadership succession planning, and facilitating upward employment mobility, managers tend to occupy space, whereas leaders, in contrast, create space. Managers work themselves into a job, whereas leaders work themselves out of a job. And I think this quote, in the context of people and talent management, just amplifies the difference between being a change leader, being a change manager. And we've discussed this difference, this form of differentiation with previous modules. I think the hallmark of an exceptional change leader is this willingness to create space. Career mobility, employment fluidity, very important. Leadership succession planning. We spoke about the 9-box matrix, and of course, the importance of managing top talent and being a talent liberator, not suppressing, not monopolizing, not hoarding the most talented employees in your organization. So to cement this particular learning outcome, I'd like you to complete learning activity 14. So I'd like you, again, using Deloitte's irresistible organization as the yardstick, the 5 factors, the 20 sub-factors. I'd like you to identify 5 high priority gaps, and of course recommend the talent management and improvement strategies, in particular when managing a remote workforce. So I think keep it simple. What I would recommend on a 5-point rating scale, with 1 being poor, 3 being average, 5 being excellent, what I'd like you to do is to rate each of the 20 sub-factors. It'll give you a score out of 100. And when you send me this email, I will share with you the performance threshold score, which correlates very nicely. You'll also, if you watch the video clip, they also suggest the difference between good and average and great companies. And I think there's usually a 10 to 15% difference. What is that performance rating that we need to aspire to? I'll share that with you, just a matter of interest. But first do the scoring, first do the diagnosis, and identify those particular gaps. Also, that is 14.1. When you look at question 14.2, what I would like you to do is indicate how you can leverage employee voice strategies to promote this workplace democracy that we spoke about, to stimulate innovation from the shop floor, especially where you're working with a disengaged workforce, disconnected, the remote working force. How do you keep these channels, these platforms for open dialogue and transparent communication? How do you keep them open for stimulating this innovation, this democracy? Employee voice. What is your employee voice strategy? Again, I don't think it should take you more than 4 to 5 pages. Put it together, drop me an email, respond to these 2 questions, and certainly this will be a very useful way, like the preceding 13 activities, to then further this discussion and also look at employee engagement and learning engagement in the same context.
This is Charles Cotter signing out. I'd like to thank you for watching the video clip, Change Management and Leadership in a Crisis online learning program. Please be on the lookout for subsequent uploads on my YouTube learning channel of the other modules. Also, please have a look at the chat box section. You'll see in the comment section. If you'd like to access a copy of the workbook in PDF format, I'll gladly email that to you for this specific module, but also the other modules of the various video clips. I'd also like to remind you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please press the notification bell to be alerted of the subsequent uploads of the other modules, and also like to encourage you to reach out and contact me. My contact details and social media presence will be provided on the screen very shortly, so I'd encourage you to reach out. And of course, I would welcome any sort of communication or feedback regarding this video clip or any other learning content on my YouTube learning channel. Thank you. I appreciate your ongoing interest and active social media support. Thank you. You keep well. Bye-bye.